Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next episode. Trying to talk. Episode 54 or 50, I'm
Yeah,
54. There we
54.
go. See, yeah. See, my memory is beautiful. So, something better than that is or at least, oh God, words are beautiful right now, and I love the word beautiful. So, anyways, this.
About those transitions.
Not those transitions. So the playoff standings right now for LPL are looking really, really nice, or at least I wouldn't want to say obvious or something that we would have
Can you
seen.
just like get to the point? I don't understand what you're talking about.
As you can tell, I just got out of bed. So, first team, EDG. Who would have expected that? Everybody. Everybody. So the first place team going into going into the playoffs, they'll be the big old boss that everyone's gonna be looking to beat down, or at least compete against, is Edward Gaming. How do you guys feel about how about their chances getting first place in playoffs?
Well,
Let's
the
go to Kelsey.
the way the playoffs bracket works is that they're guaranteed at least fourth.
Yeah.
Given that they've already locked in first seed, like no one can match their point record. Everyone is shocked in the last week. And on top of that, EDG plays three more matches, so even if they could match their point record, um, they're in a really good position to shore that up.
hmm
So, I mean, given that they don't start until semifinals, like you're already in a really good position to get the first place. And on top of that, you'll be able to see all the other teams like climbing up the ladder theoretically, so you'll have a better idea of what kind of competition you'll have.
Yeah.
And I feel like if someone does take them down, it's going to be in like the regionals tournament instead of, or worlds instead of in playoffs. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Emily?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, since they started, and like, I know that anyone who's listened to me talk about EDG all season, my main frustration has been with their rotating roster. Since
Mm.
they magically, their players magically were healed by the power of Sanshao and EDG doctors. They
Just one
like
sec.
now that
Just to tell you, like the China Joy show matches happened this week, and that's why we had kind of a wonky schedule where like the big teams only played one game or one
hmm
match. Sancho was casting the China Joy games. Like
oh my god, that would have been amazing.
I wish I understood Chinese. Anyway, go ahead, please.
I
Yeah.
wish someone could translate that because that would be like amazing. No, I think obviously since they started playing their actual roster, they look significantly improved. Especially the first week they were together, they didn't have the same synergy. I think this week they showed that they had improved, like kind of regained a little bit of that back.
hmm
Um, and I think I do agree with Kelsey's assessment. I'm not sure if anyone will be able to touch them in this, even in the playoffs. However, possibly in regionals. It might just take some time for
hmm
other teams to catch up. But right now they're looking really, really strong.
Okay.
Or if
So,
there's like some meta change or something like that.
Yeah.
yeah. Do you think that, let's go to Drexen on this one. Do you think that Edward Gaming of today was as good as MSI, or even comparable?
Hmm. I wouldn't say they're like back to that point yet, but it's close enough to the point where I don't think anyone really stands a chance against them because, as we said, not only are they the top team, but they do have the other games to look at for anybody that approaches their territory. So I don't know. They look really really good. I just kind of wish they didn't do this like random swapping to train their newer players this season because I would like to see how big the disparity would have been if they just kept this roster the whole time. So I feel like they shook up the synergy they were really well known for, and it kind of put them back. And I think it like makes the standings look a lot closer than I feel they should be, even though they are
Yeah.
still pretty significantly ahead of the points. Like I feel like the gap would be even bigger.
hmm
But that said, yeah, I don't really see anyone like, with the exception of maybe some outstanding circumstances or like was mentioned before, like a meta change or something, I don't see it. Like, yeah, I don't see them dropping many games in the playoffs.
All right, then we can just move on down
Well,
to Chaogut,
I will say
Kelsey.
the one thing that I think looks stronger about them is their jungle support synergy.
Hmm.
I think that their early game vision and map control is better, just because I don't know. It's really really tight in terms of like how Mako goes in and the amount of invades that Clearlove is able to carry off,
Hmm.
and just before at MSI, like you could invade Clearlove. It wasn't really the thing, but you don't like anyone who goes into his jungle is just punished. I think immediately by the vision control that they have lately. So
Hmm.
I think that's one aspect that's improved. But in terms of the overall team fighting and the synergy of the roster, there are some weak points that weren't there in MSI.
Okay. Would you say that was probably their weakest point going into any games, or just the fact that they're like you can pretty much target out Clear Love, and you would find and they would find themselves kind of like in a bit of a problem there. Do you think they've shored that up a bit with just being able to like their mid support jungle synergy, like I guess supporting Clear Love?
I think he
Do you
still
think that's a fair
is
point?
vulnerable if you
Hmm.
can, especially if you can push out some of the lanes. Like
Yeah.
if you have really strong solo laners, for example, like a team like LGD or something like that that can kind of contest their solo laners, you can maybe make a play on them. Especially if Mako is on the opposite side of the map, so the vision control on that side won't be as strong. So I think that's an option.
Okay. Let's move on to Chagu, because they have been getting closed in on by the rest of the pack. Do you think this team, because I guess this has been the most talked about team in terms of what their skill actually is, and their chances going into Worlds, little, I guess, and like playoffs, let alone Worlds. Emily, what's your take on Chagu's current strength?
I think, I mean, a lot of people were pointing out Swift this past week and kind of saying like, oh, Swift was exposed.
Mm-hmm.
He's like not as good as we thought he was. I think the kind of the pluses and minuses of Chowgu are that Swift is still a really fantastic jungler. However, I don't think that he has improved as much as someone say like Spirit has from his time in Korea. Like, and I'm using Spirit as an example because they went up against each other as well. But like Chaogu is, in my opinion, a lot different of a team than I thought they'd be. Like, they definitely evolved from when I saw them in LSPL. They definitely evolved from the beginning of the season. They've been trying a
Mm-hmm.
lot more stuff. I feel like
Yeah.
they're a far more cohesive team than I ever expected to see out of them, to be quite honest.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that their strength and their weakness really lies with Swift, and his engaged sense has always been something that people have pointed out as like super questionable at times. Like to the point when he was on CJ Entis, he would be diving in and then just looking around, being like, "Team, like where are you?" Like,
Mm.
and because the rest of the team wasn't going to follow up. And I still think you do get some of those moments, and I felt like, I mean, he had a couple of rough outings, and I also just felt like that's still a weak point. Like his decision making at times is still going to err on the side of aggression and cost his team.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a significant problem. The other weird thing about Chagu is that we saw them trying out all these weird swaps. People were or we were kind of commenting that they were trying to prepare themselves for playoffs because they knew some of their own weaknesses. I'll be curious to see how that pans out, like where they end up in the seeding, first of all, because their second seed is not cemented by any
Mm-hmm.
means, and then I definitely want to see them in playoffs to see how they applied like what they presumably learned from all these things they've been trying out this season. But I do think you have to point out as Swift as like a really strong point of that team, obviously, and then also very weak point at times in terms of decision making.
it also seems a bit likely that Xiaogu or Snake will move above them simply because Xiaogu's only set this next week is going to be against OMG. So,
Well,
Yeah.
Snake only has one set too.
Oh.
Against IG, right?
Against IG.
oh,
So IG has 3 sets, and they're the next ones up. So they actually have, since they have 28 points, they actually have a decent chance. The problem is that I can't bet too hard on IG right now. So I still think actually like Snake has a chance of 2-0ing their set. They could probably 2-0 IG, and then that would give them 34 points. And since Xiaogu has been splitting literally every set, like the most you can bet on them is to get 33. So it's actually probably odds-on favored for Snake, but yeah.
so what would you say, or so going back to the topic of Xiaogu, just how do you think, Kelsey, that this team, like, what do they need to improve on first and foremost, other than I'd say maybe just Swift? Is that their only problem here?
And for me, it's definitely the most glaring problem. They also have a tendency to fall behind in lanes, pretty consistently. So I feel like they're always playing from behind. So if you couple that with the fact that Swift likes to just go in, you have actually a pretty bad combination. But
Yeah.
they're able to come up with a lot of creative compositions that make that work. So they have more options in that area. And you see them trying to play something different between every game, and that's part of why they're going 50-50, is they're going with something that's like more comfortable and then something that's not. The problem, it's just really hard for me, because you can draw a lot of similarities, I think, between Xiaogu and Snake last split, but I do think Xiaogu is more proactive about fixing those problems. Like, you could draw a parallel between V and Baka in terms of champion pool, except I think V actually has a bigger champion pool than people give him credit for, and he hasn't played a lot of Gnar, actually, which is the surprising thing, because I would rate that his best champion overall in the games where he plays it. It's like really solid. So it
Yeah.
almost seems like they're saving that a little bit, because they try to put him on Hecarim and Maokai like every game if they can, or they try to put him on something new or different. But his Gnar has always been really, really solid. So I think they're just trying to avoid playing that, because he can literally solo carry a game on Gnar, I think. So they might be trying to save that. So things like that are interesting to see from them. Swift is playing a wider variety of jungles, and I think we made the comment before that when he plays tankier junglers, it's better because he has more time to just go in and die, but the fact that before he dies, but the fact that his lanes are falling further behind makes it really hard for them to follow him up. So even though he's playing these tanky junglers, he still dies anyway if he plays like Gragas. Doinby, I think, continues to be probably the most solid aspect of that team overall right now. He's usually at least goes even in lane. He has like a ridiculously large champion pool, and he's just really solid. TCT is fine, but I think he makes the bottom lane laning suffer a little bit, and TNT is much more teamfight oriented than farm oriented already. So you're in this weird situation where it's like they're good as a duo, but they're best in team fightings, and their laning has been suffering a lot more. And I think right now we're in the situation where they really are trying to rely on their bottom lane to pick up some of the slack, and it's just not happening. But I think overall it's just like this Swift thing. You can kind of draw parallels between Swift and Crystal. Like Swift, Crystal, very mechanically talented guys, but they'll just overextend and expect their team to like back them up. Yeah, so it's interesting, but I think that Xiaogu, we're seeing more thinking and more development from them, so I still think that they'll still finish relatively high, but in terms of the gauntlet, and I can see them beating like any team that's not EDG, LGD, or Snake pretty easily in a best of 5.
Okay.
And I actually think a matchup with Snake will be really interesting, but
Perfect. All right, Drexen.
So yeah, I actually think that Xiaogu is doing pretty well, but on top of just Swift feeling like he's slumping. I
Mhm.
also think that it's just an issue of adaptability of playstyle, because I don't think he's actually gotten significantly worse, but I think that he was able to get away with what he did before just because Thunderhold could take junglers were stronger when he started doing the strategy, and then also Chaogu was more ahead in lanes during the beginning of the split, so when they're naturally ahead and he can soak more damage waiting for the team to catch up and follow up, they're able to do that more effectively with him playing the same style versus blowing up and things not going their way because this team's like behind or whatever. But I actually don't think that Swift is the only one underperforming. I actually feel that, or maybe they're just, I don't know, maybe they're just, they feel too much pressure, but I actually think that Chagu's bottom lane is kind of underperforming.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And not in the sense that they're doing bad, but in the sense that I feel like for about 2/3 of the split, they were the best bottom lane in China, and TNT certainly the best team fighting carry in China. And now it's they're still really strong at team fighting, but I still think that they're not doing as well as they did before, which is kind of a problem for the team.
Mhm.
And like for instance, I think it was their set against World Elite. They were running like Callista Thresh, which is just absolutely ridiculous lane, and they still managed to lose trades just from TCT being really sloppy and going up front and taking chunks and getting the Silver Bolts procs off from Vayne, and they were just like losing that lane. So I understand they're not really lane, like Mystic's a pretty damn good laning AD carry actually now,
Yeah.
and they're not necessarily known for laning in Chaogu in the bottom lane. They're more team fight oriented. So I guess it kind of makes sense, but I feel like in favorable matchups like that, they can't really afford to do that in playoffs or fall behind that much because there's only so much you can do with a lane deficit. But with that said, I still think they're going to finish top 3 or 4 in playoffs. I don't think they'd finish second like they are in the regular season or the regular split, but I think that for being their rookie split, that's actually really, really good, and I don't think people should expect more than that from them. And if they do even get like third or fourth, that's actually incredible for how recently they've gotten into LPL. And on top of that, I think that unlike other teams that enter from LSPL and feel like they have a disadvantage in a best of 5, I feel like Chaogu's smart enough to adapt for a best of situation. And I especially really like the way, or how flexible Doinby is with his champion pool. And I think they can pull out some really smart stuff, like how they pull out like Nautilus mid, or he can play Morgana mid, or something like that. Like he can actually make unconventional work in the current meta. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think they definitely have their flaws, and I think that there's been some fluctuation in performance between jungle and bottom lane that wasn't really there for the earlier parts of the split that are now getting punished. But even if they played like, I would say like 80% of their potential, I still see them finishing top 4.
Still a
Yeah,
lot of
that's-
just like yeah.
That's one thing I really like about Chaogu, as I think you put it, is like they're creative and smart. I think if they can conceptualize based on your draft what kind of composition you're drawing,
Yeah.
and the flaws in it, they can counter it really well with their own draft. And so they're very mindful about what the enemy team is picking, which is something that we never saw out of Snake last split, because Snake is
Mhm.
very one-dimensional, and these are the champions we want, and same thing over and over again, where I think Chaogu is like actively thinking, and this is the point I want to hammer home as the difference between these teams, because I think that even if Chaogu has a similar run where they finish like 4th, because Snake finished 4th, they just... It's like the teams that are above them are better than them,
Mhm.
rather than they just suck. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like looking up Chagu's picks and bans this week, I feel like a lot of what I'm seeing is they're bot lane blind picking, or at least just like they're getting counterpicked into poor situations. So I can understand
They do that
that,
a
like, if
lot,
they're
though. They tend to
yeah,
early pick their bot lane the most, because I think they really want like the counters for the mid lane and jungle.
Mhm.
But
yeah.
or Swift will just randomly pick Lee Sin into Rek'Sai at the end. Whatever, no one cares.
Hey, I love Lee Sin. I love Lee Sin. So yeah, that might be a good, other than the random factors at the bottom lane, that might be a good excuse for why TCT and TNT are not doing so hot.
Do you think they're
Well,
underperforming,
then, like I said, I think-
though?
Yeah, I think they were actually trying to remedy that issue and still had problems. Like I said, with like the Callista Thresh lane, there's no excuse for them to lose that 2v2, I feel.
Mhm.
So,
Okay. Alright, let's go on to the next one. Oh, this is gonna be beautiful because I'm actually. I find this to be the funniest one. Snake. Okay, so Snake. Last season, or at least last split. Oh my God, we were just raining elbows on this team. This team. Okay, so it's just funny that they're probably, or at least like, kind of likely, there's a possibility that they'll be able to get the second place position once again, but based on their own strength. So. Emily.
Like how it's like complete
Yeah.
180. I don't know.
It's really funny. So Emily, Snake strengths and odd weaknesses. So lead me off with that one.
I think Snake, it's again similar to last year, but not really. I think in comparing last year's Snake to anything this year, be it current Snake or Chaogu, when you're drawing similarities, I just want to lay the groundwork for this. It's really important to mention just how ridiculously one-dimensional last year's Snake was in terms of like composition.
You mean spring, right? Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not last year, sorry.
Well, last year they were one-dimensional also, but in a different way.
They were in LSPL, so we didn't care. But this year's Snake, when I'm thinking about how they did last split as opposed to how they did this split, I still think they're very focused on or they're at their best when they're doing those like crazy team fights. I think they've shown when they're at their best, they're just insane. The addition of you for that team has just absolutely skyrocketed their overall level of play, in my opinion. I thought it was going to be like good, but I honestly didn't expect it to be this good. He does so much for Souldra, it's not even funny. And then I think Snake, when they do their thing, they just kind of go off. I don't see them beating LGD in a best of 5 for sure. I don't see them beating EDG in a best of 5. Chaogu would be really close, I guess, depending on... I think Chaogu is a more flexible team, and like we touched upon previously, they think very quickly, so
Yeah.
they'd be able to adapt, I think, to Snake in drafts, and then also like in the game itself. It's actually really hard to tell that matchup also because, like I said before, I'm not quite sure the type of play that Chaogu is going to come out with in playoffs as opposed to what they've been doing in the regular season, which is a lot of like putting themselves, I think, purposefully in bad situations so they can kind of work their way through it, work their way out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of matching them up against Snake, it's going to come down to if they allow Snake to get to those like crazy 5v5 fights. And if they do, I don't think Chaogu can, like even with TNT, I don't think they can match what they can do in that type of situation.
All right.
If
Does
that
anyone
makes
agree with
sense.
that?
But I mean,
Yeah.
I do think that they're going to get outmaneuvered by LGD, like pretty significantly. LGD has only improved since the last time I saw those teams, like both in the best of 2 and then also in their series in the Demacia Cup.
Yeah.
And then, so I think LGD would definitely take it, and then I also think that EDG would definitely take it, obviously.
All right. Does anyone agree with that in terms of Snake's strengths being through the team fight, but I guess in a different light?
Yeah, no, I think their team fight is excellent, and I actually really hope they go into the playoffs at the ZR, you, Martin, Ella, comp, just because I feel like that comp covers each other's weaknesses the best.
Yeah.
And right. Okay, so I actually do agree that Snake is the best of the best right now at team fighting, even over EDG, at least until EDG refamiliarizes themselves with their main lineup, which I think they have almost completed doing, but still have a little bit of work to do. And even though they are still very team fight focused team, I feel like they've still expanded their horizons on what they can do. And I feel like a lot of the subs that have been introduced to the team that are now starters in the lineup, like ZZR and Martin, have stabilized the team a bit and made it a bit more safe.
Yeah.
And Yu is a strict upgrade over Baka, and I think that's actually a huge deal for the team. Like they pretty much have a top 3, if not like top 1 or 2 team fighting mid lane, which is like they did so well last split with Baka, so this is actually huge for them.
Mhm.
And with Martin being on the team, over really good for this meta because you kind of want to prioritize like just stability. And on top of that, I also think that even though Snake has evolved into being a little bit more responsible, playing to the meta and that sort of thing, that they're also kind of bringing in personal flavor with the fact that things out of his comfort champions he was forced to play in spring, although he does still play those. He's able to kind of go for his more questionable build top laners. And while he still has the kind of thinking too far ahead, or not thinking far enough ahead, sorry, engage type problems, when he does go off, you can really feel it. The impact on the team is really good. So I actually think the only way that Snake doesn't get second place is if they end up facing off against LGD or EDG and they just get out-rotated or outsmarted. But given LGD's current circumstance, I feel like Snake's team fighting and ability to engage should be enough to secure them second place. I don't really see them getting below top 3. So that's where I think Snake stands.
And Kelsey, what do you like? Where would you place Snake right now if you get into the playoffs? Do you think that they would play, of course, like much better than Chaogu, or what's your thought on current Snake?
I think my thing with the Snake is still, and I've actually gotten into disagreements with Frosk on this, is she thinks their lane swap play has improved a lot. I think their early game standard lane play has improved like crazy. Like they're much better at it. Like Fondra is able to pressure a lead much better. There's a lot of synergy between their solo lanes and ZZR, and the bottom lane is like really good at least going even. So I think their standard lane play is really good, but we haven't seen them lane swap a lot. Like, they lane swapped against LGD recently, and they had that one lane swap against RNG, and in both of, I think they had one good lane swap game, was it against Vici? But I think Vici's draft that game was, like, actually pretty bad. And then RNG, in the lane swap game against RNG, where they chose to opt into the lane swap, even though their matchups were actually really good. I think they probably predicted that RNG was going to swap, and then they just fell behind in both of their side lanes, and had a really hard time coming back. So I think that, for me, I still want to see consistent improvements in their lane swap, and I don't really see that. I've seen them like play one good lane swap game recently, because teams just aren't lane swapping on them, so it's like... so I'm still worried about that, whereas I think Chaogu has been experimenting with lane swapping a lot, and it favors them, and it favors them because they are falling behind in standard lanes, right? So I think that if Chaogu is able to sort of predict that and get those lanes, it actually will depend a lot on the lane swap, like the early game lane swap. And that's why I think that matchup will be really interesting. But I think late game, both of those teams are really good at team fighting. And it will depend on kind of, because it'll be about like whether Flandre or Swift get the best engage. And even if, I think to an extent, even if Swift gets the better engage or Flandre goes in weird, Flandre has like a much better safety net in Ella and Yu in terms of the zone control and just like the general, like how good Yu is at saving his ultimates for like that time to get the priority targets and just like to get the area is just so great. Like it's really incredible to watch. So I think that it's like, whereas Chaogu is going to be more about how well TNT can self-peel, almost. So...
And we're gonna be... Yeah, go on.
So I think that's why the matchup is really interesting to me, because I think the fights will be really close and really exciting. So it's going to be about how they play the lanes early.
Okay. And so... Okay. Hey everybody, whoa! Whoa! Whoa, okay, so we have just all found the ability to transform on the spot, so I'm really just You know what? I'm proud of you guys. So let's just go into the next team here, Invictus Gaming. Anyone who knows this team, and everybody knows this team, everybody knows Invictus Gaming, unless if you are new to the scene. Otherwise, yeah. I like to call them CLG of China. So much hope. So much hope. Every time, every season, there's a lot of hope riding in on this team actually being decent and successful, and then you shed a few tears. So I want to start off with Emily. I know you've probably just been through a lot in these last few seconds. You probably figured out that we were going to IG and was just like...
Suddenly the IG part comes up.
Why are you so distraught about IG? Tell me.
Okay, so, well, my personal experience with IG, I just ran through a thunderstorm, by the way. That's why I look like this.
Yeah.
I was watching Demacia Cup with Kelsey, actually, not this current one, but the previous one, and I saw it as a tie, and I, like, for some reason, just fell in love with a tie, and this is when he was top laner, this is before he was even mid laner. So this split, I was like, okay, like, IG, like, they got together last split, they're gonna go places, they did really well for the first couple weeks, and then we have internal issues, and their manager getting, like, what was it, he was let go because he, like, was trying to fix something in the house, and there was like all this weird
Chinese coach, yeah.
Yeah, their Chinese coach, and then there was the rumor that Maffa refused to coach the team because he said they weren't listening to him. So then their drafts got really bad, and through it all, like, I still love Zatai. I want this team to do well. I think technically they still have, like, mathematically they can make second if I'm right with that.
Yeah.
And they play LGD, WE, and Snake. I mean, recently, like, if just look at their games against RNG this past week to see, like, where the team is currently. Like, they wait for the late game. They can easily be taken advantage of because of that. Sometimes the tie kind of looks like he's the only person trying on the team. Like, as much as I'd love to see Cacao and Rookie go to Worlds, especially since I was rooting for the KTRs so heavily last year, before they got, like, steamrolled by Najin in the qualifier, I don't see it happening with IG. Like, they're just way too inconsistent, and I don't feel like they've worked on any of their weaknesses. Time is, like, okay. They were playing him this past week. I don't see him as, like, I'm sure Mike will step in a minute to, like, defend Kid, because he's, like, known as the kid.
The kid apologist.
The kid fan. Like, I don't know what's going on with Kid. I honestly think that Kid is a better player, especially, and I also think that he's a better player than people give him credit for, and that he's been playing, like, this split. However, if he is having some sort of, like, motivational issue or self-esteem issue or whatever, I'm not sure that playing him would be technically an upgrade, and maybe that's why they were running time this past week. It seems like they have way too many issues, and like I said, you can very easily take advantage of the fact that they obviously wait for a late game, so if you attack them early, they don't really know what to do, and they just look kind of bleh. So... R.I.P. my IG hopes and dreams.
More or less. It feels like the Invictus. It's kind of funny, too, because anyone watching TI5, like, I don't watch Dota, but I have seen, I feel like the only games I've seen are Invictus Gaming, and it's like, can this game end? Like, can they end, like, why is it going to super late game? But, alright, Drexen, how do you feel about IG's hopes?
Well, I've never really, like, praised Kid as being, like, the best AD carry or anything like that. I just think the time change has literally done nothing for the team. Like, most of the shifts and the swaps, aside from maybe Vicis that have been going on this split, it's been like, okay, I can see that. Okay, this works better in this meta. All right, contextually, this is a good idea. Whereas with time, like, keep in mind this is all, like, observational science. I don't actually know the stats between the two players, Time and Kid, but just from an observational standpoint, it doesn't. I wouldn't necessarily say Kid is better, although I do think he's a better player. But in terms of performance, I wouldn't say he's necessarily played better. I just think the addition of time hasn't done anything, and at least Kid and Kitty's already had some kind of synergy established, right? So I don't know.
Kid and kitties, as Frostgren would say.
Kid and Kitties.
Kid and kitties.
I tried to match their names together and put kitties, but then it realized that just doesn't work. It just
It's
But,
yeah, it's
Kitty.
just the name.
Yeah, you won't be able to
Yeah.
tell the difference.
But yeah, in terms of what Emily said about Z-Type maybe being the only one carrying, I could kind of see that. Just because he really his sole reason for not really retiring was because he wanted to beat EG and he received hope that he could. So I mean, I'm sure that's not like his sole reason, but you could see that he's probably matured as a player, which is funny considering like the rest of his team might have like gone backwards in that sense, since Zitai used to be the one that had motivational problems and kind of did whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
But I mean, he started really young, so that's another thing to consider. But yeah, I mean, IG just whenever they play from behind, they don't look like they know what they're doing, and I think they are in fourth place just because when teams don't stop Rookie and Zitai from going ham in the solo lanes, like they can usually do well enough with an advantage to win. But yeah, I feel like that's going to be pretty heavily abused in playoffs, when teams know how to locate their ways of managing and dealing with IG strengths. So, yeah, I don't know. I think they'll do okay, but I actually think that even saying they're top 4, I don't think they'll match their regular season placement actually in playoffs. I think they'll be below top 4. I think. But
Okay.
I think that depends. If they can just do really well early game and kind of just snowball off that, I guess they'll do fine, but I don't know. And maybe they'll act like they give a shit, or they won't just immediately give up when they fall behind in playoffs, so who knows.
I just want to add context to how ridiculous the statement is that we're making, that Zitai is the only one who cares. Like,
Yeah.
literally, we made jokes about Zitai in the past when he used to play mid, that he was just a gimmick player in terms of the fact that he was talented and gifted, and that he could pick up new champions really easily and then instantly just like play them. But over time, before, like, theoretically right now this would be the perfect season for him as a mid laner, because we have so many fucking patch changes,
Yeah.
right?
That changes everywhere. It's just
a
like
brand new
Yeah.
OP mid laner every 2 weeks that he could just, oh, I remember how to play this champion faster than everyone else in the league.
If there's one player in the LPL that has not have a level 5 mastery on a champion, it's probably Zitai, because he's literally played every champion in the game. So, well, actually, it's Zitai and Flandre, so it's just
Yeah, he can just play it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's like super good at it. So as you see over time, other people pick up these champions and become better at it, and you realize his work ethic must be pretty shit, because he's just like naturally playing this champion. And then if you watch his stream, he's goofing off all the time. There's actually a feature that Ryan Lue made. I don't know if it's been released yet in English, but there's this section at the end where they have outtakes, and they said, so how seriously do you rate yourself? And Zitai says, I'm very serious right now, very serious. And then it shows like cuts of him singing on his stream, like goofing off, picking random champions.
oh my
Like,
god.
Yeah.
Zitai is kind of a joke in terms of his work ethic, but this year, theoretically, he has been very serious, and he's been working hard, and he really wanted to spot back on his team, but he still like loses his attention span sometimes. So he literally has like stickies on his computer that just say focus like 50 times.
Yeah.
So Zitai is just kind of a hilarious player, and to think about him in terms of that situation being the most serious on the team, I think that it's just, I mean, you see Kakao and Rookie at the venue, they're just kind of chilling. Kid, I think, had a huge motivation problem. By the way, the reason why they were playing time is because supposedly Kid had to go back to his hometown to prepare his visa in case they go to Worlds right now.
Oh, good timing.
Okay.
Good
I don't-
time.
I mean, I guess it makes sense because
Oh.
playoffs is like
Don't kid like that, rather.
13 through the 13th through the 23rd, and then regionals is like the 4th through the 6th. So I guess it's like a convenient time to do it. But
Oh my god, stop. Let's end this.
but it's like the thinnest excuse I've ever heard an LPL team make up. So
Yeah.
pretty much.
It's funny because it's like I say everything is relative, and it is. Everything is relative, and when it comes to IG, like at least earlier IG, they didn't have any. Oh, they did have Youngsu, but I don't know how much he was paid. But it comes down to the fact that it was like Zatai was like the least affected or impacted financially because he was a rich kid, and that must have done something to the fact that he was not a very motivated player because like he doesn't have to like play for his life essentially, and so now you find this like a same issue coming along with, let's say,
Well-paid Koreans?
yep. Like the
Well, I
Koreans.
mean,
Like,
okay, I'm gonna step in, and it's not really in their defense, but like if you watched and or were a fan of the KT Arrows last year, I'm not talking about Kakao when he was on Bullets, because that's like a whole different team and like a really specific, almost like perfect union that made like one of the best teams in my opinion, League of Legends history. I'm probably biased as that is my favorite team, but the KT Arrows were a team that like was known for having a really high skill ceiling and doing dumb crap in games. So it's not like I don't think that there's this huge variety between what Kakao and Rookie have been doing on IG and what they were doing on KT Arrows. I think the thing that helped KT Arrows was the fact that they were obviously, like, I don't know about IG's like management and coaching staff, but it seems kind of disorganized. Whereas I think the KT organization tried to keep them on track, and then additionally, I know that going into that one summer season, Kakao was like, I'm going to be serious. Like, I'm going to be super, super serious.
yeah.
And then they ended up winning in against Samsung Blue, which is just, like, an amazing match. But, like, it's not like Rookie and... I mean, Rookie was more consistent than Kakao, in my opinion, but it's not like the two of them were known for being, like, these super, super ridiculously serious players. Like, I do think they want to win.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, but at the same time, like, they're known for having super high highs and, like, really low lows and doing really dumb things in game.
Yeah.
So
I do want to point out the similarities between KT Arrows and IG, and that it comes to the point in which, yeah, Kakao and Rookie do carry a lot of their games from what I've seen. Like, I used to watch a lot of Korea. No, just that's a bit sad. But like it's like it's bottom lane troubles and then kind of top lane troubles. And I feel like with KT Arrows, it was very obvious to point the weaknesses and, let's say, point out Hachani, or let's yeah, like you could point out Hachani, and people will always say, oh man, when Hachani goes off, he goes off or something. But that's just saying if he plays relatively decently, it's like, okay, then they don't have such a large luggage to carry.
Then they don't have someone who dies in Tribush every game.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
it's just like So it's one of those situations where I feel like it's unlucky for Kakao and Rookie. They do need a stable team. All they need is a stable team. I think they don't even need playmakers. They just need stable players. They need players who can stand in a lane and not die.
I feel like they're too stable. That's my problem with them, is that they're they just don't do anything. They don't.
Yeah, that's the problem with IG right now.
And like, you've seen in games where they win, it's because Zatai has like this ridiculous lead because he's pulling on this pressure top, right? And then so Rookie in the bottom lane can just farm, and then they can team fight. Well, late game, they're just like, oh, I guess it's about time for a Baron fight. Oh, I guess it's about time to siege a tower. And then they show up, and you can see like these high skill ceilings.
Yeah.
But you need like Zatai to act as a bridge. And against top teams with better top laners than Zatai, because frankly Zatai is not actually that good of a top laner, this is not going to work.
Yeah, and the hardest thing about this all is that as good as Kakao is, and as long as like people pick him up as an amazing jungler, and he's a high mechanically skilled jungler who, quite honestly, he's not an engaged player. He's not like an insect who will come in and, regardless of his skill level or regardless of his decision making, he doesn't make the necessary plays for his team to actually start and engage. And so you want to look for that in your, like, anyone else on the team, likely the support. And if you have like
Oh god, the kitties hate. I can hear it.
It's
I can
coming.
feel it.
It's coming.
Wafting.
Like-
It's coming.
It's coming, but they don't have it, and it's
That's
and
why you brought up Hachani.
he needs to play more Blitzcrank. He needs to play. We need more Blitzcrank picks. It's just, no, I'm fine. Like, this is just needs to be it's just a playstyle thing. They just need to address it. Like, if you're gonna have kitties, they need to have someone like play Callista, play Vayne, be that player who just goes off and like basically can't live for himself. That's all I'm asking for. Just like this, if that's how you want to play your team, like they've had those picks and ban situations too, where they just like, okay, we want to win a game, and they just like have Janna, Vayne, or Janna, Callista, or and then
Kid's win rate on Vayne is actually really good this split.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then Zatai picks Shen or something like, and they really pick that supportive composition, and they can just win off of it, like by playing two like
Lulu.
exactly the playstyle. And Lulu, yeah, about Lulu, but yeah, it's just they can play to that style. They don't play to that style, and if they want to. And it might just not work. It might just not be a synergistic style with how Cacao and Rookie work. I don't know, but
It's weird because Cacao like had, in my opinion, like a pretty good engaged sense when he
Yeah.
was on KT Arrows. So I don't know, like, and I talked extensively with Kelsey about this the last split when we
Yeah.
were talking about Invictus Gaming and how like when he first came he was like really hesitant and then he hit his stride like late, like following Demacia Cup
yeah,
is probably when IG looked their strongest, in my opinion, like going through playoffs. And he was all of a sudden like making plays and all this stuff, and then this split that just kind of like tanked halfway through. So I don't know what that's about.
yeah.
I feel like literally they were so hopeful after EDG won MSI, and they're like, oh, we could be the best team in the world if we beat Edward Gaming. And then they faced Edward Gaming in the first set.
And they just tilted
They
off
got-
the planet after that.
Yeah,
2-0'd and just like stopped. They're like, oh, well, I guess that's it. I guess we suck. I guess carrying doesn't matter.
it just. So here's the real question, and I'm gonna pose this. I'm gonna pose this to Kelsey. Okay, so going into playoffs, let's say the standings remain as they are. Last time IG faced Snake, it was in playoffs. Worked rather well for them. This time, how do you see it? What's the chances? Now, I'm not going to ask specific chances. That's too much betting. I want to be a factual. We need to remain like we need to hold true by the facts. How do you see this
Snake's
team?
gonna win.
Okay, all right. There we go. All right. Okay.
It's just like I said. If like I honestly feel like looking at Invictus Gaming to decide whether or not they're gonna win a matchup, you just say, which team does your team have a better top laner than Zatai? Yes.
Yeah.
Snake has a better top laner than Zatai. Okay, you're good.
There we go.
Woo.
Well, and additionally, like what IG likes to do, like we just talked about Snake. What did they do best? They are really good at late game team fighting,
Yeah.
like, and that's kind of what IG tries to rely on. But
Yeah.
then Snake is just so much better than them.
Yep.
It's yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on to the next one because as much as I love Invictus Gaming, I love Snake more, and I just feel like it's not looking good. Oh my God, is the next team. OMG. Let's start with Drexen on this one because I know Kelsey has a lot to say about this one, but I wanna we're gonna build up the fumes.
Probably don't.
You-
Actually, but go ahead.
Okay, Drexen. OMG. How do you, they have such a different, let's put it this way, different playstyle and pick ban situation than the rest of the teams. How do you feel? Do you think,
That is very different.
do you think,
It's just a different
Different.
style. That's all.
guys just, they are playing,
Having a top laner that plays two champions is just a different
It's just very
style.
different.
hey, there we go. They are playing
Interesting choice.
Going next week. Let's start off with
Yeah.
that one. How do you feel like that will work out for OMG? Do you think that's going to improve them? Or
So I'm really hoping like Going comes back and just goes like super ham on Rise and like 47-0s whoever they face.
Yeah.
But the thing is that even though I don't really have a lot of faith that Going's going to come back and actually monster people, like he'll probably just go one way or the other. But I actually think that what Going coming back does do for the team is it provides like an element of mystery, because Jiang's like super predictable, and his champion pool has been a problem the entire split. So at least with Going coming back, outside of like scouting solo queues and like experience with scrims, if OMG are doing any with him, they won't actually really know what to expect, and that's going to be like an element of surprise that OMG hasn't really had in their back pocket this whole time. With that said, I still feel like even with him, OMG has been really, really sloppy, and even though they're still close enough in the standings with everybody else to climb up, depending on how well Going does this weekend. But the problem is that OMG has like a really hard week next week, so their seeding into playoffs is likely going to suffer as a result. Which is why I think just based on the fact that they're going to have so much trouble with the regular season means that they're going to be going up against EDG or Chaogu probably. I mean, if they do really poorly, but more realistically, they do have a chance to go against like Snake or IG or something. But I just feel like they're going to get completely wrecked in playoffs when that comes. But I think that also depends on if they use North or Uzi, and it also depends based on that pick who they're up against too. I feel because I feel like against some teams you can run with Uzi, and then actually, are the LPL playoffs? Do we know what patch those are going to be on? Because they just announced like the new patch changes, and that might actually make a difference. Honestly,
it's the same schedule as Korea in terms of patching, but the dates of the LPL playoffs are August 13th to 23rd, and the regionals are going to be September 4th through 6th. So regionals will probably be on the new patch. Playoffs are probably going to be on 5.14.
Okay. So for the sake of the old patch, I think OMG are going to suffer and then maybe get a little better in regionals just because of those changes. But yeah, right now I think I
just don't think they'll play UZI. I think they're kind of done with him.
So then that really comes to the next conversation. What's the expected team that they're going to be rostering? Because it feels like that's the question with OMG every season, or at least it's playoffs times. Like they haven't gotten their shit together.
I think even splitting 1-1 with the teams they're up against this week is going to be a stretch. So I want to say
that'd be a significant achievement for them.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. So like at best, probably Snake or IG, and I think with the roster they're currently fielding, unless Going comes back and monsters people, if they're against Snake, they're going to get crushed, and if they're against IG, then they have a chance, but I still think that IG will team fight better. So I don't know. I just think when I put it in my head, it feels like against anyone else that's ahead of them in the standings, OMG is just going to get stomped. But
so then the question is now, Emily, does it matter who they roster? Let's say if they use Xiang, if they use Going, of course we don't know what's been happening with Going, but do you think it matters? Do you think that Going is a player who you can just drop him on the current iteration of the team and they'll just like skyrocket?
Iteration of the team is one thing. I do think that like with the state of top lane right now, like it being kind of snowbally, first of all, he just has straight up a better champion pool. So even if he doesn't play like all that well, at least it gives them a little bit more flexibility in drafts, and I don't feel like I don't really feel that he'll do any worse than Xiang. So whatever Going does, it can't be worse than Xiang, and chances are it's actually going to be a lot better than what Xiang can do. I mean, with the current top laner meta, I honestly think that there is a chance, like I'm not counting on it, but there is a chance that Going can come back in, and if they play North in the bottom lane, like if they run the North cool love lane Going combo, that they'll be able to snowball Going, just because the manner in which the top lane meta is right now.
Okay.
However, in terms of the actual, because you asked not about like the meta itself, but like the actual team synergy, that I have no freaking clue. Like,
Yeah.
I have no idea how it's going to work out. Like, people were citing that Going had, like, a loss of motivation, or that, like, and now they're doing this, like,
Oh,
they're
bye-bye, Cam.
basically...
he's dead.
Oh my God. Earthquake.
Yeah.
That was doing so
Whoa.
well, dude.
I know.
Alright.
Like, they were citing, like, loss of motivation. Now they're doing this seemingly huge event around him, like,
Mhm.
hinting that he might retire, but then he came out and said he's not going to. So, I mean, we have no idea. Like, I don't know how much he's had, like, how much time he's had with this iteration of OMG, like, how he even fits in back on the team.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I mean, he's played a ton with Cool and Loveling, so that is, like, something that he should be able to kind of, like, ease his way back in.
Mhm.
And I also I don't think, like, the thing is, like, what are we comparing it to? We're comparing it to Xiang, and Xiang has a really limited champion pool and can't do half of the things that Going can do as a top laner. So I honestly have no idea, but I don't have a lot of faith.
Theoretically.
Yeah, and so here's my worry about all of this is that even though we can all say that Going was and probably indefinitely probably can be better than Xian at his role, but I think that the role that Xian created for himself was really stable in how the team works around him. Like, literally, he played Nunu and realized that I could just like do nothing in this lane, play extremely safely, and just win out passively. And so you come into a situation in which Going asks for more. So that's how are they going to play around that? How is Loveling going to play around that? That's the real question.
I actually think it works out fine as long as they use North instead of EZI.
Yeah. And so questions. Probably not the best time to be asking those questions, but they.
Oh my God! Is this real life right now? I hate everything.
This is amazing. I love this.
This is our best show ever.
I can't believe that happened twice in 5 minutes.
Whoa. Okay.
Whoa!
Whoa. You should have every time this happened. You should have been like, oh my God. Okay, I'm sorry. Oh my God.
Oh my God! I don't even know like why that's happening. Alright, whatever.
Okay.
Whatever. We'll just
It's a representation for what's happening to OMG
Yeah.
right now.
There we go. The save of a lifetime.
Oh my God.
Save of a lifetime, except without save. And they found a larger profit. Okay, well, anyways. Alright. Vici Gaming. Vici, your favorite team. We want to talk about identity issues.
Wait, does Kelsey not to get to rant?
Oh, wait. Oh!
She's Going.
I thought I gave you that time, but in reality, that was when you died. Okay, Kelsey. This is your time to shine about OMG. I wanted to spare you.
The only thing I wanted to say is that I think in the past, OMG's playstyle has been very trust-centric in terms of we're all going to blow our cooldowns and this is how the team fight's going to work and we're all going to get this pick because we all know we can do this stuff. I feel like that kind of playstyle is going to be really hard to execute after Going stops carrying, Loveling is benched for a while, Cool just, like, kicked this guy, theoretically. I don't know, we don't actually know why UZI was benched. I feel like it's going to be like, oh, he's going to I think part of the team dynamic might be, in theory, oh, he's going to fuck this up somehow, so. I don't know, I think on paper, this team could still be really good, and that's the way that the OMG fan thinks, right? It's just like, this team could still be really good. This team's skill ceiling is ridiculously high. Like, theoretically, this team has, like, enough talent to be,
and she
like,
self-destruct.
the best team in the world, but their coaching staff, their approach to the game, whatever, has always been fun.
Her rage, it's overflowing. What can we do? Now you're good. You're back in. You're back in.
Just get going. Getting really angry right now.
TLDR, whatever. Okay. TLDR. Yeah.
That is
angry OMG fan.
This is literally angry OMG fan. Just doesn't understand the concept, but it's happening.
Time for the connection to just die again.
This
It's out. Doesn't come back for the day.
Ugh.
Like, I'm out.
We're done. Peace.
Mic drop.
We're done. Peace.
Just Beachy Gaming.
No, it's
Ooh.
just like, in theory, be good, but it isn't. That's it.
Yeah. Let's go to Vici because I feel like that one's going to be a little more reasonable in how much of a fuck up it is. Okay, so they have 2 players. I think we talked about this last time. And essentially, they have a new team. How many times will they have a new team before they're fine with their players and actually are stable? That's the real question. Do they really do they value Koreans? I mean, Chinese people. That's the real question for Vici Gaming because
I think players is better than people.
Do they value Chinese people?
Chinese players is what I meant. Hopefully this doesn't get translated to some to some forum and I just come off like, oh my god, did he just say Vici doesn't value Chinese people? But Vici Gaming right now, essentially their Chinese players are just on rotation. Carry's gone. Hatong, no one really cares for Hatong. Hatong's gone. And Hatong. And Endless, and Vasily, that's the name. Oh my god, blast from the past. They're gone. So the question is this team ever going to understand the meaning of synergy? Kelsey. Kelsey.
So, the more I watch Peng, the more I think, why were they playing Hatong all season when they had this guy on the bench? There's literally no reason. This guy hasn't, like, screwed up anything catastrophically yet. Usually his skill shots are really on point. His team fighting seems pretty good. He literally let the team come back from behind, which I don't think I've ever seen them do, and I'm just like, why? 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 Unless it was a situation where he was like bad at first and practiced really hard, and they're like, oh, okay, you're competitive now, you can play. But I don't know. It's just weird to me.
Imagine a team. Let's go with Emily for this one. Imagine a team where it was carry top, dandy jungle, Peng mid, endless 80 carry, and Mata support.
I don't know, dude. I think Juan is better than Endless.
Okay, Juan, but like, just keep a player. Just keep a player.
Xuan.
But if they use Juan, okay, let's just say they started with this team from the very beginning. Where would they be now? Where would they? It's the real question. Where would they be?
See, that's the thing, though.
Up, maybe.
Yeah, like
Where
it's
are they now? The
they're in
VH1
sixth
special.
right now. Like, yeah, they're so. That's the frustrating thing about Vici. Like, they have Dandy, they have Mata. The team you're talking about, like, would have been. They could have had Carry, like, pardon the pun, Carry from the top lane.
Yeah.
And they would have still been, like, the incredibly, like, smart team that they were last split to overcome their weaknesses. Except those weaknesses also wouldn't have been, like, jumping and randomly face-checking bushes and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's really hard to tell. My frustrations with Vici are that they seem to be so quick to sub out players for, like, no reason, seemingly no reason, or, like, to Kelsey's point, don't bring in players that now are performing way better than their previous iteration of the team.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, like, a lot of it, like you said earlier, like, a lot of their roster changes just don't seem to make sense. They don't seem to be committed to having a strong, like, synergy on their team, which, like, I think they could have been a legitimately good team. Maybe not beating, like, Chaogu, Snake, and then, like, maybe not beating, like, LGD or EDG, but, like, they could have been a really smart team if they just stuck with players that can do okay in laning phase, like, not shit the bed, not team fight super poorly, or, like, make gigantic mistakes like Hatong sometimes did, let's be honest. And, like, they could have been a fairly good team that would be able to like they showed in the first season, that would be able to somewhat out-rotate their opponents to victory.
Yep.
And it's really frustrating looking at this team now. It's not like OMG where you look at the roster and you're like, on paper, this is super awesome. It's more like if you had just stuck with one decision, like, and stuck with it and seen how that team went, then you might have been okay. But now I still don't think they're, like, absolutely super convincing. They play against LGD and then RNG this week. RNG is kind of, like, oddly scrappy, and this is, like, I think they have to win out to make playoffs, and something else has to happen, so, like, they'll obviously be very motivated. I don't see them, like, 2-0ing LGD at all to get a better spot, so I don't really have a lot of high hopes for this team in playoffs, and yeah, it's just sad.
Yeah.
Did 2-0 LGD before though. Oh.
That's true.
I mean, I would have loved to see. I mean, even without any of the other changes, I would have loved to have seen at least Hatong not start for the entire season and see where they are, because I think that would make the biggest difference. I think the problem is still just that Dandy is not jungling. I mean, God, I hate the fact that he's not jungling. I actually think he's actually doing pretty well as a top laner. He actually had a really sick Gnar play this weekend, but the problem is that it's hard. Like, I want to say that World 6 is a good jungler, but the problem is that I feel like if you ban out Gragas, he just, like, looks lost. Like, he's not anywhere... Like, the disparity between his skill and Gragas versus other champions is, like, unreal, including synergizing ults with Dandy and other engage on the team. And so, when you ban out Gragas, like, Vici Gaming looks like a different team, honestly. But I will say, like, the same thing I said last week, except last week I thought we didn't have a big enough sample size that I can pretty much definitively say that at least the mid laner is better, and then Jwen, I guess, is still up for debate, but I still think he's better than Endless and obviously better than Vasily. So, in terms of playoff, yeah, I think they'll just probably hover around 5th, 6th, 7th, maybe, because
Theoretically, the best they can do is 4th.
Yeah. So.
Something
yeah.
you know. So.
Judson, could you lower your camera a little bit?
Whatever.
Sorry.
No, we got
It's
it.
fallen victim quite a bit.
Okay, yeah.
Where it was, and also after it fell, I couldn't readjust it because I still have the spinning circle bug even on my preview and stuff.
Oh,
so
God,
I have no
yeah,
idea what my camera looks like at all right now.
That's unfortunate.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So,
Everything's attacking us this episode, man. It's brutal.
we're just getting the Attack on Titan. Anyways, so I feel like with the team that I mentioned, if they held on to it, I actually thought that Vici would have been able to contest even with like Chaogu. Snake probably would have been on losing on of that rivalry, but I think they would have done extremely well. Unfortunately, that isn't the case, and they have to deal with the new trials and the new problems every time they make these changes. And
I think even calling it trials is like being dishonest, though, because they've obviously had to have seen these teams play and at least maybe done a few scrims with them to identify them as good substitutes for the roster. So I feel like they should have made these changes a lot earlier, as Kelsey mentioned. Like, it's just weird. I don't know.
Okay. We can probably just move on to LGD. Oh, go on. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, there's just a history of Vici Gaming, like, training up players that make good carries, and then just letting them go. It's, like, really weird.
Yeah.
Like, they can't keep on, they don't really, I feel like they don't have a concept of what good talent is, because they let SMLZ go, and SMLZ isn't, like, really good, but, like SMLZ ended up being on the team that beat them out to get into LPL one split.
Yeah.
They let Wayless go because they said that Wayless or Godby, because they said that he couldn't be, like, coached well, and he just made too many hero plays, and he just felt like he wouldn't ever be, like, a team player. And then look at him now. He, like, literally screws himself over to be a team player every game. So it's just really strange. Like, I don't really understand their structure and their concept of talent so much.
Then we can even bring in the fact of Amy, but that's just like people are gonna have a mixed opinion on Amy and not so much on any other of the players who just mentioned. But I do legitimately think that these players are skilled and they are coachable. So they just it is what it is. Sad day for Vici Gaming. Um, Trials and tribulations. We can probably just end up going to LGD on this one because I feel like LGD is a team that are actually going to get a lot of surprising praise. Only surprising because they're 7th in the standing currently, but they don't look like they're 7th. So let's even start with Kelsey on this one. How do you feel about LGD currently and how they play?
So, in theory, they have a rough weekend. Like, if we said this weekend last split, I think everyone would say, oh my god, they're not going to do so well because they're against OMG, Vici Gaming, and Invictus Gaming, but we just went through those teams and talked about the various problems they have.
Yeah.
So I think that given the problems LGD has, it's kind of like the better of two evils. LGD do have a new Taiwanese analyst, and they're working on getting a coach. And they have a couple of options that could theoretically happen, especially since the LSPL Playoffs just ended. They have... And Acorn has been practicing again, so, like, but it's just back to the jungle for me. Like, I really think their decision to either commit to Xiaoxi or TBQ is going to make or break. And even just maybe if they commit to TBQ, like, it's going to suck, but it's a better option than swapping them back and forth because...
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just strange. Like, I don't have a problem with swapping Flame and Acorn because I think both of them have shown that they're extremely well-rounded and good at, like, everything, weirdly, but to varying degrees, of course. But I think that it's just, like, so I don't have a problem with them. They both seem to synergize with the team in different ways and do well. But I think that, like, the TBQ Xiaoxi swap is less good because TBQ and Xiaoxi are fundamentally different in how they play and what they bring to the team.
Okay.
Yeah.
You guys agree with that? Drexen?
Yeah, I mean, I still feel like LGD is capable of being a top team for sure. And one thing I want to reiterate when we're talking about the positions and how, like, it must be really confusing for people that don't watch China to be like, why do all these analysts keep saying LGD is like the second best team in China, blah, 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 like they're 7th place or whatever. Well, keep in mind the standings are much closer than they've ever been in any other season, and a lot of people, like, have been paying a lot of attention to a lot of the other changes in roster that kind of hurt teams, but people, like, don't seem to acknowledge the fact that that also kind of struck LGD. I mean, they had to start the split off without PYL, which is basically a free win for every team because of the way the team functions. Like, PYL is the cerebral core behind the entire team, and so starting without him immediately put them at a huge disadvantage. And then on top of that, they were forced to use Flame TBQ for an entire week as well. Yeah. So they had 2 weeks where that was kind of like, you know, an issue, obviously. And then not only was that an issue because of those weeks, but because it actually affected the synergy with the team just because they had it. It's kind of like the EDG thing where even though EDG look really good when they're together as their squad, they don't like look quite as clean and crisp as they would be if they just stuck with that squad. LGD actually kind of has the same issue, but I mean, I'm not saying LGD is on the same level as EDG, but I do think that they're the most likely second place contestant in playoffs just because, again, it hasn't changed. The fact just hasn't changed that they're still the smartest team probably in China. Their rotational play is like really, really sick, and they're just really, really smart. They can outsmart teams, and their team fighting's not even that bad. And individually, across the board, they still have really good players too. So it's not like the tactical thing is just a crutch. It just supplements the players that they already have that are really good. And I don't know. Yeah, I would like to see how the team goes into playoffs using like Acorn and Xiaoji. I think that'd be really good. And I mean, I could be surprised, and maybe they will end up at a lower placement. But I mean, this isn't the first time LGD hasn't. It's probably the lowest LGD has placed in the regular season in a while. But this isn't anything different from usual. Like LGD generally isn't always top notch during regular season, and it's always in the playoffs where they show up. So the same thing's gonna happen again.
Where did they place spring split? Was it 6th or 5th?
Last one they placed 6th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's pretty close to now. So. And again, that was without all these disadvantages plaguing the team as well, besides TBQ. And even that TBQ actually did pretty well in spring because of the meta. So,
well, and like we
the
just
biggest
went
thing,
through,
and I don't know if I've kind of harped on this. Sorry.
No, Kelsey, go.
I think I'm out a huge delay of some kind.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
and they also had
so-
they also had the
Kelsey,
they
go,
also
Kelsey.
had the week
Biggest-
where Godby couldn't play mid. So yeah, there's so much shit, dude. Sorry, Kelsey, go ahead.
The biggest thing for me is their support structure and their coaching. They have a problem where they can't really use, where they spent most of the split because of issues with BBSY, like effectively without the coaching stuff. That's really significant. When we talk about how smart and strategic this team is, the fact that they did necessarily a coaching staff that was super consistent, that they could bounce ideas off of, huge. So the fact that they now have a Taiwanese analyst and they're starting to put that structure in place is going to put them like to make a really awesome playoffs run. But I don't think we'll necessarily see that materialize this weekend. I do think that they can still do pretty well. Theoretically, like just to hammer home event, like how close the standings are, they could make second by the end of the week.
Yeah.
Like that's a theoretical possibility. So that's how close the standings are.
Yeah.
That was going to be my point, and to piggyback on that idea, they play against IG, OMG, and VG, and those are all teams that we just got through kind of like picking apart their specific issues in game. And I feel like if there is any team that could kind of go in and really pull them apart, it'd be LGD. I mean, getting 3 sweeps in a row is something that's pretty usually unheard of in the LPL unless your name is EDG, but technically they could, if they do that, they'll at least get 4th, which will place them out of the like first stages, like gauntlet round, which I think would be really good for them. So I do hope that I think they have the talent and the like intelligence to get that 4th place spot. It still will be really difficult, I think, but I don't know, of all those 4 teams, like LGD, IG, OMG, and VG, I believe the most in LGD by like a large margin.
Okay. And so, with that being said, it really comes down to the last, and probably not even going to end up being the last place team, let's be honest here. So I can even just open it up to you guys and ask you guys, who do you think will take the last spot for playoffs? Will it be, right now, in the standing, it's M3. But, like, for instance, RNG, Royal Never Gives Up, is up for the grabs, Unlimited Potential, and World Elite. The World Elite dream. World Elite has still a lot of games to go because of that random week in which they played 0 games. Because, of course, the schedule is mirroring.
They only play 2 sets. They only play 2 sets.
Oh, 2 sets? Okay. Okay, that's fine.
UP plays the most out of the teams that are in like contention.
Okay. All right. So who do you guys think is going to be?
It's actually really Master 3.
Master 3? Okay.
I think I actually think it's pretty hard for any teams to make a run, just because like I do think RNG has to do well against VG Gaming, which I don't think necessarily they will. I think VG understands early pressure well enough to not get like sidelined by RNG, and I think that W and UP have to have like miracle runs to get it. So yeah, I actually think it'll just be Master 3.
Okay. Drexen?
I think the only way Masters 3 doesn't make the playoffs is if Condi underperforms. I mean, we always know that Dade is like the wild card, right? You'll either show up or not show up. But the thing is, I think the team live and dies by Condi's performance, because the team consistently relies on Condi to get them ahead early, and when they get ahead early, they do really well. But if Condi doesn't get ahead early, the team is like chickens with their heads cut off. So I would say it's M3 with like WE being the second closest, just because RNG, even though they're looking to get a little bit better for the problems Kelsey cited, I don't think they'll make it. And then Unlimited Potential, even if they did really, really well, I don't see it happening, because the only time I see Unlimited Potential do really well is when they put Sketch on like something like Ashe or just a supportive champion, which is probably the only supportive AD that they can use him on right now outside of Kalista, and then they bring like an insane amount of CC, like when they were against Vici. Like they had like TF, Shen, Alistar, Ashe, and they did really well in chaining their CC together, but they still ended up losing the game. So there's almost no hope for them in the sense that they can bring like their forte team composition and still struggle so much. So definitely, just in terms of potential, World Elite would be the runner-up, with Masters 3 just definitely seeming like the best choice for 8th.
Okay.
Although it would be really depressing to have a playoffs without World Elite. But
M3?
It is what it is.
I mean, Emily, did I just call you M3?
You did.
It's the E. See, that's the thing. It's always the E. It's always.
Oh god.
Or,
Alright, I actually agree with
Wemily.
that assessment. I think M3 will likely get it. It'd be hilarious to see WE just like Spirits just like, nope, we're going to playoffs, and somehow like hard carry that team. Because they do play against UP, and then they also play against IG. IG is not terribly consistent. However, I do think that if their drafts are like even half on point, they'll probably take at least a game.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, like it depends. Like, is Moffa doing the drafts or is he not? Like, then UP is like such a. I mean, I really like rooting for UP. I think if you watch UP, you'll see that Hart has like significantly improved. Hart's been an amazing player to watch this current split. However, the other problem with UP is that they have to. I think they have to sweep through EDG, King, and WE, and that first of all, I don't see the EDG thing happening. But even if something happens, like, because if you remember, UP was actually the first team to kind of sweep EDG, and they honestly did it in like a really smart way. Like the first game, EDG didn't play their actual roster, but then the second game, if I recall, they did play Pawn, and Koro was still out, I think. But they did like win on their own merits. It wasn't like, like especially in the second game, it wasn't EDG is, just trying to get their new players in. Like I felt that they did come up with a really good strategy for it. I just don't see that happening again, especially now that EDG has committed to playing Koro and Pawn pretty much every game. And then additionally, King is one of those teams that's actually really hard to sweep. I think if I recall, they're tied for second in like the most 1-1s in the entire split.
Yeah.
So yeah, the only team to have not lost to them is actually IG, which is really funny.
Yeah.
To have not lost it.
Because IG is such a consistent team. But like, so it actually is really hard to take both games from King. And then WE is kind of
just never know what you're gonna get.
But so I just don't see UP doing it, even though technically, like, they are technically in control of their own destiny. And then Royal Never Gives Up is just in a bad situation because they play against Beachy, and then they have to rely on other teams losing. So they just have the odds kind of against them last week. King is in there, even though they can't make it. They can play spoiler if they want to.
Oh god, who's King facing? That's the question here.
King is.
Oh yeah, they're facing.
Like I thought of.
Yeah.
I theoretically think that like the best placing for King is actually 11th, because we now know the promotion tournament bracket on the LSPL side.
Yeah.
And if you're in 11th, like, so this is hypothetical. Like, if King wants to make it back into LPL, I think the best side of the bracket is for them to not be on the side with the 9th place LPL team, for one thing. And also, looking at it, like, the 5th and 6th place LSPL teams are Young Glory and WE Future, and the reason why they're 5th and 6th place is because they actually played a big part of the playoffs without, like, some of their starting players. They didn't play Koreans, and I think there were visa issues. Like, WE Future didn't have Old B, Young Glory didn't have a Fly, so I actually think that those teams are scarier than Newbie, whereas, like, 11th place faces Newbie, and you're just like, Newbie, good, and then...
Yeah.
And then after that, you just have to finish you just have to beat like the 10th place LPL team, and that's like pretty much it. So theoretically, if King wants to make it back into LPL, I'm not saying that they don't, okay?
You never know.
They're in a pretty good, like 11th is a good placing.
Yeah.
I hope that like King and RNG get kicked out of LPL, and then like King's roster gets picked up by like Royal Strikes Back or something. Something like that happens.
Of course, the theory is that Royal's owner owns both King and RNG. So if they place 9th and 12th, right, they'll be on the same side of the bracket, so as long as they beat their LSPL teams, they face each other in semis, and one of them gets back in. So, yeah. Awesome.
Oh,
The World Elite
yeah.
conundrum. We got World Elite versus World Elite Future. If that happens, that'll be the most hype. I don't even care about the playoffs. Give me relegations, because I just want to see World Elite Future. Oh, 950. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna love this. I'm gonna get the popcorn ready.
I'm so sad. There are so many talented players on that roster.
I know, right? Get rid of these World Elite people.
If you look at King's lineup and the fact that they absolutely cannot make playoffs no matter what, it's like depressing.
Yeah.
It's the most.
Like,
they're like
what
the
the
most
fuck?
depressing team to watch.
They really are.
People who watch LPL and only LPL will just miss out so much because they'll be asking themselves, man, where's the talent? Like, they'll be looking at Aluka and they'll be like, is Aluka really the best? Like, what the best they can get? And it's like, what? No, please don't have this conversation beside me. Just don't do this. Like, I don't want to hear this.
Luca the god.
The organization, like that organization has possibly like the best, best Chinese top laner like outside of the top 6 top laners in LPL. Like they have 957.
Here comes the rage.
God bless.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We got Aluka. It's fine. It's. Anyways, without all that rage, we went through all the teams here. We went through every team, essentially. We're gonna have to for the next episode. We're gonna have to look back at this. Yeah, we're gonna have to look back at this next episode and figure out which one of the bottom feeders actually ended up getting inside. We can even discuss the relegation placements because that's
how
gonna be
World
fun.
Elite's gonna win LPL Summer or something.
What if
Stupid.
What if the 2 teams that come
Never
back
give
in?
up on your dreams, Jackson.
Never give up. What if the 2 teams that come back out of relegation
Keep your dreams,
is
okay?
World
Keep
Elite?
your dreams. There we go.
Moderate.
Thank you.
World Elite and World Elite Future will come out of relegations. This is going to be a thing that's going to happen. This is going to be the most hilarious. This is going to be so funny.
Well,
Ugh, okay. So, I guess that's pretty much it for the episode. Yeah. We pretty much went through...
World Future makes it in, and then it's just like they just shift around the W and E letters again. and they just give them a different icon and team name.
Few Gaming. What if it's Few Gaming because they take the World Elite Future and it's flip.
Oh,
Few.
there you
Few Gaming.
Oh man.
This is gonna be great. They're just putting in the sleeper agents, the World Elite sleeper agents, just putting them in.
Also, congratulations to Energy Pacemaker All and Hyper-Youth Gaming, who will be in LPL next year.
I can't believe Hyper-Youth Gaming
and
is
XQ
for sure
can be
confirmed in
Again,
LPL.
for random.
Oh, they're gonna be benched. Yeah, you're right, Kelsey. Some of these players. Oh my God! If anyone loves these players,
I like XQ.
I don't know about
they should at least
I don't
keep
know about
XQ.
EPA.
Yeah.
I don't know about EPA because I feel like the Energy Pacemaker organization has traditionally not been very wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I heard they also got purchased, so I'm not sure.
Oof. Well, we got a problem, and it's yeah. So I don't know.
Chinese off season is the best.
It feels almost useless, kind of like discussing anything about the rosters of Hyper-Youth Gaming.
Worst.
But worst. It's just.
It's interesting.
It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. I hope 17 stays, as sad as that sounds. Okay, so.
No, I like 17. I like XQ.
Yeah, I mean everybody loved XQ when he left LGD, but they'll just find and replace Prey.
17 and YOLO.
Yeah.
You would replace YOLO.
XQ and Shu actually have really good synergy, and like the top and jungle could be improved upon.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's kind of how I feel about it.
So yeah, it's gonna be something to discuss later on. So I think that's it for the episode. It was rather long, actually. Even saw some wardrobe changes. I know. So I guess shoutouts. Let's start with Jackson.
All right. Shout out to the panelists and Esports Heaven and the wonderful tech issues that have plagued everything. including our show, TI3, Challenger. Gotta love
It
it, man.
hasn't been a good couple days.
It's the problem with esports, man. Nothing in sports can compare to this bullshit.
Yeah. ECS one was a bit depressing.
My heart goes out to those affected by DDoS forevermore.
Mm-hmm. All right, Emily.
Shout out to Kelsey, who has to edit this episode.
Oh, that sucks.
And then also, shout out to both INTZ Esports and Pain Gaming. They have both been really awesome about talking to me about the upcoming Brazilian CBLL finals, which are this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So it's my only chance to plug them. All like maybe one person who watches China Talk and would think about checking it out, because I believe EU playoffs are going on at the same time.
Yeah.
But both of these teams, one of them will earn a shot to the International Wildcard Tournament to then go hopefully get a wildcard spot to Worlds. So
hopefully. I've seen that
to knock out one of the EU teams.
It's looking likely if Brazil gets to the, well, whatever Brazilian team ends up going to their side of the wild card. So that's going to be interesting. I think they face hard
random,
yeah.
And then they face whoever comes out of Latin America. So
that's going to be interesting. Okay, Kelsey.
Shout out to her ISP.
Shout out to the Score Esports, and I'm going to have an article out about like the playoffology, and also, yeah, shout out to China because I'm going to Shanghai. It'll be fun. We can play Stop the Waker on stream. Anyway, yeah, so that's about it.
All right. Well, I guess that's my turn. Shout out to Team Dig EU, Dignitas EU. Had a really unfortunate set this game. I'll probably end up addressing it later on in the day. We'll see what happens. It was really unfortunate, but that is life. I was about to say regulations. Regulations, I don't understand them, and I don't agree with them, but we'll see how it works out. All right. Now, I guess everybody wave, and I guess Go Going's already waving, so that's.
I know.
Alright.
Yeah.
I don't know. They look really, really good. I just kind of wish they didn't do this like random swapping to train their newer players this season. Because I would like to see how big the disparity would have been if they just kept this roster the whole time. So I feel like they shook up the synergy they were really well known for, and it kind of put them back. And I think it like makes the standings look a lot closer than I feel they should be, even though they are still pretty significantly ahead of the points. Like I feel like the gap would be even bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, yeah, I don't really see anyone, like, with the exception of maybe some outstanding circumstances or, like, was mentioned before, like a meta change or something. I don't see it, like, yeah, I don't see them dropping many games in the playoffs.
Alright, then we can just move on down to Chaogut.
I will
Kelsey?
say the one thing that I think looks stronger about them is their jungle support synergy. I think that their early game vision and map control is better, just because I don't know. It's really, really tight in terms of like how Mako goes in and the amount of invades that Clearlove is able to carry off. And just before at MSI, like you could invade Clearlove. It wasn't really the thing, but you don't like anyone who goes into his jungle is just punished. I think immediately by the vision control that they have lately. So I think that's one aspect that's improved, but in terms of the overall team fighting and the synergy of the roster, there are some weak points that weren't there in MSI.
Okay. Would you say that was probably their weakest point going into any games, or just the fact that they're like you can pretty much target out Clearlove and you would find they would find themselves kind of like in a bit of a problem there. Do you think they've shored that up a bit with just being able to like their mid support jungle synergy, like I guess supporting Clearlove?
I think he still is vulnerable if you can, especially if you can push out some of the lanes. Like if you have really strong solo laners, for example, like a team.
And I felt like, I mean, he had a couple of rough outings, and I also just felt like that's still a weak point. Like, his decision making at times is still going to err on the side of aggression and cost his team.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a significant problem. The other weird thing about Hughbo is that we saw them trying out all these weird swaps. People were, or we were kind of commenting that they were trying to prepare themselves for playoffs because they knew some of their own weaknesses. I'll be curious to see how that pans out, like where they end up in the seeding, first of all, because their second seed is not cemented by any means. And then I definitely want to see them in playoffs to see how they applied like what they presumably learned from all these things they've been trying out this season. But I do think you have to point out as Swift as like a really strong point of that team, obviously, and then also very weak point at times in terms of decision making.
It also seems a bit likely that Hughbo or Snake will move above them simply because Hughbo's only set this next week is going to be against OMG. So,
well, Snake only has one set too.
Against IG, right?
Against IG.
Oh.
So, IG has 3 sets, and they're the next ones up. So they actually have, since they have 28 points, they actually have a decent chance. The problem is that I can't bet too hard on IG right now. So I still think actually like Snake has a chance of 2-0ing their set. They could probably 2-0 IG, and then that would give them 34 points. And since Hughbo has been splitting literally every set, like the most you can bet on them is to get 33. So it's actually probably odds-on favored for Snake, but yeah.
So what would you say, or So going back to the topic of
like LGD or something like that can kind of contest their solo laners, you can maybe make a play on them. Especially if Mako's on the opposite side of the map, so the vision control on that side won't be as strong. So I think that's an option.
Okay. So let's move on to Hughbo, because they have been getting closed in on by the rest of the pack. Do you think this team, because I guess this has been the most talked about team in terms of what their skill actually is, and their chances going into Worlds, I guess, and playoffs, let alone Worlds. Emily, what's your take on Hughbo's current strength?
I mean, a lot of people were pointing out Swift this past week and kind of saying like, oh, Swift was exposed. He's like not as good as we thought he was. I think the kind of the pluses and minuses of Hughbo are that Swift is still a really fantastic jungler. However, I don't think that he has improved as much as someone say like Spirit has from his time in Korea, and I'm using Spirit as an example because they went up against each other as well. But Hughbo is, in my opinion, a lot different of a team than I thought they'd be. Like, they definitely evolved from when I saw them in LSPL. They definitely evolved from the beginning of the season. They've been trying a lot more stuff. I feel like they're a far more cohesive team than I ever expected to see out of them, to be quite honest. But I do think that their strength and their weakness really lies with Swift, and his engaged sense has always been something that people have pointed out as like super questionable at times, like to the point when he was on CJ Entis, he would be diving in and then just looking around being like, team, like, where are you? And because the rest of the team wasn't going to follow up. And I still think you do get some of those moments.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next episode. Trying to talk. Episode 54 or 50? I don't know, 54. There we go. See? Yeah. See? My memory is beautiful. So, something better than that is or at least, oh God, words are beautiful right now. And I love the word beautiful. So anyways,
About those transitions.
About those transitions. So the playoff standings right now for LPL are looking really, really nice. Or at least, I wouldn't want to say obvious or something that we would have
Can you
seen.
just like get to the point? I don't understand what you're talking about.
As you can tell, I just got out of bed. So, first team, EDG. Who would have expected that? Everybody. Everybody. So the first place team going into the playoffs, they'll be the big old boss. Everyone's gonna be looking to beat down, or at least compete against, is Edward Gaming. How do you guys feel about how about their chances getting first place in playoffs?
Well,
Let's go to Kelsey.
the way the playoffs bracket works is that they're guaranteed at least fourth.
Yeah.
Given that they've already locked in first seed, like no one can match their point record. Everyone is shocked in the last week. And on top of that, EDG plays 3 more matches, so even if they could match their point record, they're in a really good position to shore that up. So, I mean, given that they don't start until semifinals, like you're already in a really good position to get the first place. And on top of that, you'll be able to see all the other teams like climbing up the ladder theoretically, so you'll have a better idea of what kind of competition you'll have.
Yeah.
And I feel like if someone does take them down, it's going to be in like the regionals tournament instead of, or worlds instead of in playoffs. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Emily?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, since they started, and like, I know that anyone who's listened to me talk about EDG all season, my main frustration has been with their rotating roster. Since their players magically were healed by the power of Sanshao and the EDG doctors. They
just
like now that.
Just to tell you, like the China Joy show matches happened this week, and that's why we had kind of a wonky schedule where like the big teams only played one game or one match. Sanshao was casting the China Joy games. Like,
oh my god, that would have been amazing.
I wish I understood Chinese. Anyway, go ahead, please.
I wish someone could translate that, because that would be like amazing. No, I think obviously since they started playing their actual roster, they look significantly improved. Especially the first week they were together, they didn't have the same synergy. I think this week they showed that they had improved, like kind of regained a little bit of that back. And I think I do agree with Kelsey's assessment. I'm not sure if anyone will be able to touch them even in the playoffs. However, possibly in regionals. It might just take some time for other teams to catch up. But right now they're looking really, really strong.
Okay.
Or if there's like some meta change or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that, let's go to Drexen on this one. Do you think that Edward Gaming of today was as good as MSI, or even comparable?
I wouldn't say they're like back to that point yet, but it's close enough to the point where I don't think anyone really stands a chance against them because, as we said, not only are they the top team, but they do have the other games to look at for anybody that approaches their territory. So